what about challenges? What surprising moments are like in the good way and in the bad way? Like what was the, I don't know, the significant adjustments that you faced in both Switzerland and Netherlands when you arrived?
So I read something about Swiss culture before I went that would help me to understand what we were facing. And I forget the author now, but he likened Swiss culture to a coconut culture, whereas Americans are a peach culture.
Mm.
So Swiss have a hard exterior, but once you get to know them, they are very soft and easy to get to know and wonderful people. And the example would be that the man whose funeral service I went back for this past weekend, a dear friend. Americans, on the other hand, tend to be a peach culture, so we appear to be approachable. We appear to be easy to get to know. oh, just ready to engage in any conversation, but at the core, very difficult. There's a part of us that's impenetrable, according to this author. That was such a helpful insight for me in moving to Switzerland.
So it's a little bit like the getting to know people. It's a little bit more difficult. You felt like
Yes.
at least at the first level of contact, it's difficult to make friends, to give contact at the very beginning. No, I suppose.
At the beginning. Yeah. But then once we established that friendship, oh my goodness, I view some of those relationships as lifelong relationships.
Makes sense. I think there is a couple of cultures in there, and Switzerland and Germany are closely related in that sense, I would say. What's the most rewarding part of working abroad as a pastor for you?
uh, you know, it's a surprisingly difficult question to answer. I enjoy being a pastor, period, no matter which culture I happen to be working in. But I think what was rewarding about it was that challenge of diversity. So when I came back, I felt compelled to write a book called How to Become a Multicultural Church. So it was that struggle to understand a variety of cultures that I appreciated in the end. I mean, that was what I didn't realize it at the time, but that was what I most needed to do.
Very interesting.
When you're with people who look like you and who speak like you do, I think you take for granted how easy it is to communicate. The smallest, facial expressions communicate a great deal. So I'm very comfortable in my own culture. But then to take me out of this culture and put me in a different setting requires a great deal of concentration. And I love that challenge.
Talking about challenges, also, like, how did you manage to learn? You said that you arrived nearly at the proficiency of German, which is not an easy language at all. How did you do it? Like, you invested a lot of hours into it?
I went to a language class in my village. I did not live in Zurich, where the church was, but I lived in a village, and as it turned out, there were other expats like me who needed to learn German for the work permit. So weekly language class. I read a daily German newspaper. I listened to something called Slow News, published by Deutsche Welle. So every day I listened to the news, but it was for people like me who were trying to learn the language. I spent a month one summer in Berlin at the Goethe Institute. And so that was a total immersion for a month with other students who were much younger than I was. And I can't resist telling you this. I had a wedding in Potsdam, so a suburb of Berlin. But that was the first time I'd ever spoke German in a public setting, and was expected to, communicate it well. And nobody complained, but I don't think anybody complimented me either.
That's a hard one to get, though, especially in Berlin, because most of the people doesn't. At least now in the center of Berlin, it's even difficult to hear German. So it's.
Yeah. I was surprised by how multicultural Berlin is. Yes, yeah.
I was just asking if you work also in English in the Netherlands.
I did, and I have a funny story about that. Again, they wanted a native English speaker to be their pastor, but I thought I would be proficient in Dutch because I grew up among Dutch people. So I can't resist telling you this story. I went to visit a woman in a rehab center. She was recovering from surgery, and I went to the front desk and I said, I would like to see Trudy Vandermeulen. And the person at the desk said, oh, I don't think we have a Trudy Vandermeulen. And she was looking through her papers and she said, oh, but we have a Trudy Vandermeulen. And I said, that's what I said. She said, no, you didn't. But we do have a Trudy Vandermeulen. And she gave me directions to her room. And in that moment, I realized I was not Dutch. I'm an American who often pretends to be Dutch. And I enjoy visiting the Netherlands, but I am not Dutch.
You need to go to the root of a cultural thing to realize sometimes that you are not as proficient with the language, with their cultures, and not as involved as you think you are. No, sometimes, yeah. What is so? I lived in a couple of European countries right now, especially, and never lived in Switzerland or Netherlands, but I lived in Germany, which is close enough, and I noticed that the religion belief or the belief between people, it's in a descent, let's say like this. Did you face challenges due to your work as a pastor in Europe, like due to the fact that people are not as religious as they used to be?
Yeah, I was certainly aware of that. The religious affiliation is very, very low in most Western European countries. So, yeah, but there are some vibrant communities of faith here and there, and I happen to serve one. On Mondays, my day off, I would travel to surrounding villages to see their churches. And they usually started out as a Catholic cathedral, and then after the Reformation, they became Protestant. And today, within the last 50 years, they've become secular meeting spaces. And sometimes churches use them on Sundays, but typically they are event spaces that people rent. So that has been the religious trend in the Netherlands, from a Catholic majority to, in certain areas anyway, Protestant to nothing at all. And I'm just glad that these beautiful buildings are being preserved.
Curious. I mean, the buildings are important and the architecture is still there and it needs to be preserved and flourish. So it is curious, though, that the transition that humanity takes, no, and beliefs. Sometimes it's interesting to see which progress and doesn't mean that they are not believing in God. That's another question. Also, like it's separate.
The trend is certainly down in the West, though. But what is clear is that in Africa and in several Asian countries, there is a very strong religious presence. And so my churches in Switzerland and the Netherlands tended to have a heavy participation from African natives and Asian natives, which made life, as I say, very, very interesting and challenging.
Yeah, I think it's typical also. I mean, in Spain, a lot of churches rely a lot on South American immigration, for example, because in South America the religious part is still very, very, very strong compared to what it is in Spain. Of course, we have a lot of immigration due to the language, and it's true that you see a lot of people in churches who are immigrants. So that's also it's very interesting to see. I
have another little footnote to add to that story. we actually saw very few expats in our churches. So I had lunch one day with the headmaster of the American school in Zurich, and I said, "Can you explain to me what's going on?" And he said, "Doug, when expats spend 2 or 3 years in a country like this, they live for the weekend, and on the weekends they are off sightseeing and skiing and certainly not going to church. Even though back in the U.S. they may very well have a church affiliation, they're not churchgoers while they're here."
Which at the end it makes sense, no? A little bit like they are there for a certain time and they want to take as much advantage as you can of like visiting everything, seeing everything, which it's nice. Before we jump to the next section, I would really like to ask you for a life hack, an advice, a tip that you would give anyone who would like to move abroad, and maybe especially also in the pastoral or community focus role like you had. What would you say to someone who would like to follow a little bit the steps that you took?
I've already given you one, and that was doing some reading about the culture. And so reading about the coconuts and the peaches was very helpful going into Switzerland. And then the second bit of advice I would give is to work very hard at establishing relationships, inviting people into your home for dinner. I had some built-in relationships. There were people who knew me as their pastor, and so I had an advantage at that level. But I still think that we had to work hard to have people into our home so we could get to know them better. And that was true for our apartment building. Believe it or not, we had to make an extra effort to get to know these old Swiss Germans in our apartment.
I can imagine, like that remembered me a little bit of Germany, like, and getting to know the neighbors. It's not always an easy task. No. When you meet the neighbor, it's because of bad things, not because of good ones normally.
So one of the jokes in Switzerland is that there are 9 million police in Switzerland, and that's about the population of Switzerland. But they are very attentive to following the rules, especially about noise on Sunday. So our neighbors would let us know if we were not behaving on Sundays.